All right, friends, we had a big one, a big trade going down. It's going down, baby. Or it already went down. Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks. Villanova reunion time at MSG, and picks going every which direction. It's a fun one, and I am joined to break it down by the great Josh Lloyd. Now, quick preface, Josh and I recorded this segment last night. Nothing really has changed since then, so I don't think that we necessarily needed the preface, but I want to jump straight into it. So, hello, welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris, at Dan Bespris on social, at Old Man Squad. If you want to follow the network over on social media, please, if you're watching on YouTube, click that like button. Subscribe as well, and if you're listening after the fact, follow, subscribe, drop that 5-star review. But again, let's just jump straight into the chat with Josh. I'll give some of my own thoughts after the fact. This is a good one. Here we go. Well, so I haven't decided how all of this data is going to get split up, but initially the plan, as I mentioned on previous shows, was to have the mighty Josh Lloyd, who's sitting next to me now, or on a screen next to me, talk about the upcoming draft. And then about, what is it now, an hour-ish before we were set to record this hit, a relatively large trade went down. And so now we got to shake things up a tad. But first and foremost, Josh, hi, bud. Welcome back. You're the second official two-timer on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, trailing only the venerable Noah Rubin. So I don't know. I guess you got some catching up to do.
I heard Noah say that the other day, and I'm not sure what your swearing policy is, but I got some choice words for him. I'll get to him at some point. Don't worry, I'll take him down. Don't worry.
Yeah,
it's all cooking up.
The battle's on. So where do you want to start? I'll throw it to you. Do you want to talk draft first? Do you want to talk Bridges first?
Let's do Bridges first, I think. Yeah, look, this happens every year, Dan. There's always trades that happen before the draft. I went early yesterday, tweeting it out, saying there's going to be a trade today, and then it happened 27 hours after I tweeted that, so it was a little bit off, but it always happens. Beal, Chris Paul, Westbrook. It's always something. I think Chris Paul might have been twice, actually, with the Clippers to Rockets one, then the one last year. There's always something that happens, inevitable. And then this wasn't just one. We actually had two trades that went down today.
The big one, at least the Bridges one, that we'll start with here, and there were more. Bridges trade to the New York Knicks for Bojan Bogdanovic, 4 unprotected first-round picks, a protected first-round pick via the Bucks, an unprotected pick swap, and a second-rounder. This is just me quoting a Woj tweet. What do you think? So I guess I'm trying to think of where to begin on this one. I feel like, at least let's start with the Bridges side. So Bridges is now going to the Knicks. Where forget all the Villanova subplots because they have an entire Villanova roster there now. Bridges goes from Phoenix, where he was more of a 3-and-D guy, efficiency, defensive stats, and that stuff worked really well for him on top of his durability, which has always kind of been the Mikal Bridges calling card. Came to Brooklyn, took a boatload of shots. His efficiency took an absolute nosedive, and his value plummeted as well. He was in the 90s this past season. What do you think, Josh, this move to New York does for Bridges? Does this push him back to what he was before? Or is this like Josh Richardson-itis, where he got usage, he became a guy who felt like he could chuck, everything else went away, and it never came back no matter where he went?
One of the big things about what he was, or where his value came in Phoenix, is he was shooting like 65% on twos and was getting really high steal numbers. Now, like I don't know whether that's going to be a possibility in New York. It might be, like, but that was really the driver. Was he was low volume, but you know the 2-point numbers were ridiculous. They were insane numbers, and they probably will come down. I think there's probably a medium area in there somewhere where he's not the level of usage guy he was in Brooklyn, but he's also not completely passive the way he was in Phoenix. And like when you look at the Knicks team, like, okay, so there's Brunson, who takes a ton of shots. There's Randall, but no one else is gigantically usage inclined. So like he can, like in Phoenix at times he was the 4th guy. I think in New York he was very comfortably the 3rd guy, which is yeah, that sort of, I guess, fits that idea of being sort of in the middle between where he was in Brooklyn, where towards the end of the year in Brooklyn, he did transition to be the second guy behind Cam Thomas. So it's sort of sitting in between second in Brooklyn, fourth in Phoenix, third for the Knicks, I think.
Is this, you think, a good thing for Mikal?
I don't know. A good thing for him in his NBA career, like undoubtedly, like it's a way better situation for him. This is the role. Like this is one of the things that when that trade happened with the Suns, I was very, very clear on like, do not look at him next year. If you're in Dynasty, you have to get rid of him right now because you would never have a higher value in this because he cannot be the number one guy. It will not last, right? So that was always, I thought, relatively obvious. So it is much better for him to be in this role. We also have to sort of remember that from those years in Phoenix, that's 2-3 years ago now, like players' steal rates often decline as they get a little bit older. So maybe that stuff never comes back. And yeah, if you're banking on multiple top 50 years from Bridges, I don't know that you get that just because of the way that, sort of the shape of the game and the teammates and all that sort of stuff. And they're going to be like last season before the injuries, the Knicks were all in a situation where like Josh Hart played 20 minutes a game and DiVincenzo played 20 minutes a game. And it's worse now. Like, there's going to be so many guys sort of battling, and that's great for them and for the team and for winning. But for fantasy, like there's going to be a million guys here who are trying to fight for minutes. And Thibodeau, I'm sure, will lean on Bridges heavily, but that means DiVincenzo plays 15 minutes a night. Like, how does that work? There's just a lot of questions there.
I think there was a Woj follow-up tweet that they feel like they can still re-sign OG Anunoby. I don't know enough about how the mechanics of this.
They easily can. The only reason they can't do it, Dan, is if OG doesn't want to sign there.
Right.
Because look, this is an immediate reaction that people have. What means OG is gone? No, not really, because the difference in salary between Bojan Bogdanovic and Mikal Bridges was like $3.5 million. It's like it didn't like take up their books. They didn't just pick Bridges up out of nowhere. They used Bojan's almost $20 million salary and brought Bridges in at 23 or whatever it was. The problem leads to some of the stuff with the second apron, but again, it's $3 million difference from where their cap currently was. I think there's some talk that maybe there's some Hartenstein issues because they are significantly limited in what they can offer him. But if they could bring OG back before, they can do it exactly the same way now. They've got the bird rights. The second apron becomes a problem. Maybe there's moves they have to make. Maybe it's trading away Mitch Robinson. I don't know. But like theoretically, they can still bring these guys all back.
To me, the more, I don't want to say fun, but entertaining element here is now you've got this, well, probably potentially tanking Brooklyn Nets team. Where do you think they go from here? Is there anything else that they could move? I know they want to bring back Nick Claxton. How much do you guys want to be part of what looks like it's set to be a pretty clear rebuild?
Do you think they want to bring back Nick Claxton? I'm not sure they do. Honestly, like I'm not certain that they do. I'm not saying they wouldn't love to have him back, but they are very clearly looking into some sort of teardown situation. They have got a million up-and-coming first-round picks, including their own back, which they got in that second deal from Houston, which is huge for them too.
Am I remembering that right? Do they have 8?
I believe it's 9, but it could be 8. Okay. It's a Utah Jazz / Oklahoma City Thunder level of future draft picks, but more importantly, it's their own, right? So they got their own back 2025 from the Rockets. So like Claxton's fine, but Noah Clowney played a lot of center towards the end of the year. Day'Ron Sharpe is still there. Like if Claxton's getting $25 million a year from somebody or 20, like why the hell would they pay that? There's really no reason for them to do that. So I'm not certain that Nick Claxton returns. The team is obviously going to be pretty rough, but like they're not adding in a rookie this year, are they? Like they don't have someone coming in the top 10 of the draft because they don't have that pick. The Rockets have got it. It's pick number 3, which would have been great from a fantasy perspective, but I don't know what they do. It's going to be one there. It's very hard to make any proclamations about the Nets because I just don't know what their team's going to be. Do they use Ben Simmons' $40 million to get like something out of it? I don't know, to like open up some space or get some younger players. I don't know what they do. Like there's so many ways that they can attack this now. Do they even keep Bojan Bogdanovic? Does he move on? Does he have a big role? I don't know. They're going to make, obviously they just made 2 gigantic moves right now. They're going to do a lot more, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned something else going on with the Nets. What was the other note there?
The other note, was it? Oh, it was just about them trading their picks with the Rockets.
Right.
So they got what did they trade? A couple of 2 Suns swaps and 2 Suns firsts, and got their own first and their own swap back from Brooklyn, which puts or from Houston, which it's so confusing. Then that apparently then puts it gives the Nets control over their picks so they can tank and be bad, but it gives the Rockets Phoenix pick so that if the Rockets want to try and trade for Kevin Durant or allegedly now Devin Booker is in the latest Woj tweet that they can say, hey, Suns, if you actually want to blow this up and be bad, we got your picks. You can have them back. So, yeah, it's
oh, my goodness.
It's a lot of stuff happening.
Is there anyone you think, Josh, again, talking to Josh Lloyd, and I forgot to mention RedRock_B-Ball, obviously the host of Locked On Fantasy Basketball and Basketball Monster lead analyst. I should have done that at the outset. My apologies. Is there anyone on that Brooklyn roster you think they're pretty well married to keeping, like a Cam Thomas maybe, or you think everybody's kind of just out there for the plucking now?
I would look at that team and, like, I'm not saying that they're moving these guys or they hate them, but like if you are looking to build to be a Nets, let's even say conference finals level team, there's no one on that squad that we should go, yet we absolutely must under all circumstances hold on here. Like Cam Thomas is going to have big opportunities this season. If you let Cam Thomas run the entire show all season, what do they win? 11 games? Like I'm not sure. Like if is Noah Clanner their starting center, they might give up 150 points a game in the second year. These could be all good pieces, but like I think we might even see this happen with the Rockets. When you're starting to get serious about winning, these good pieces become pieces that you can move in other spots if they're not exactly working. So I don't think there's anything that should be considered untouchable in Brooklyn. The untouchable part is going to be that 2025 unprotected first when they're the worst team in the league and they try and get Cooper Flag. That's the untouchable part of them now that they've got that back.
Yeah, that does kind of feel like I think you make a really good point there. Looking at their roster, none of these guys is like your future superstar that you absolutely positively have to build around. So it becomes kind of impossible to make a call on, late June, what guy you might be looking for in a fantasy draft right now. We're just sort of too far out at that point.
No, they're going to be messy. Yeah, it's really messy.
That was so. I guess I'll ask one more, and I know how you're going to answer this question. I just kind of want people to hear it, more of a broad topic kind of thing. With the Nets likely looking to be a hard tanking team, how do you approach them regardless of who's on the roster come fantasy draft season? Is this something that you're extremely concerned about? Are you ending your leagues early enough where you hope it's not that big of a deal? What do you do in a situation where a team becomes this transparent in their tank?
I think there's a lot of things you need to look at with that. Is that I think that it is pretty transparent, right? That they're going to be bad and they're going to be trying to make sure they get a great chance at that first pick. But then they're going to be bad. Like how bad are they going to be? They might be dreadful, right? They might win 14 games like the Pistons. They might not need to sit guys down. And even if they do, like, are these guys going to be awesome players that you're like, man, I wish I hadn't invested a top 20 pick in this guy? No, like it might be a guy that you get in the 70s. Like where does Cam Thomas get picked? Like 70, maybe 60. And then if you get that for 60 games of the year, that's all right. Like it's totally okay. You don't have a worry. I don't think with a first 1, 2, 3 round player that you're going to worry about like, oh, but what if they start tanking and sitting guys? I don't think there's going to be any worry in that sort of thing. So I just don't think any of those guys are going to be valued high enough or good enough to be in that position where it creates that level of negative impact for your team. But yeah, like you end your league as early as you can, but they're going to be bad, man. Like they're going to be so bad that they don't even get the chance like the other bad teams like Detroit and Washington to boost their team with high draft picks. Like they're going to be terrible. So they might just be able to play it out and be 7 games worse than everybody by the time March starts, and they're like, we're good now. We don't need to worry about any of this. That's possible.
Just
I think
play them anyway. We're terrible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what happened there. This was half of an interview that Josh and I did last night. The other half covers the upcoming draft, which is happening in just a handful of hours. So that's why the abrupt cutoff there. Big thank you to RedRock_B-Ball, Josh Lloyd. There wasn't like an official outro because I had to just abruptly carve it in half. You guys will get to see the other half of that interview in a different show/video because frankly, it just made no sense to throw the draft half in with the Bridges half. So again, RedRock_B-Ball for Josh. He is, of course, the host of Locked On Fantasy Basketball and the lead fantasy basketball analyst over at basketballmonster.com. A couple of thoughts on the trade as I see it right now. And like, again, grain of salt, because all of this stuff could change considerably in the next, I don't know, like couple of hours potentially. But or maybe it all sticks for a while. It's really kind of hard to know. But this, and I'll throw it on the screen. This is basically what the Brooklyn Nets roster looked like the second half of this most recent season. So this is basically, last 40 plus games for Brooklyn. Cam Thomas was the highest ranked net over that stretch of time. Cam Thomas was number 79 in 9-cat leagues. Final, he played 36 games in the second half of the season. 24 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists. Not much in the way of defensive stats, but, a lot of scoring. 2.5 3-pointers. Very nice positive impact free throw guy. And field goal was like acceptably bad at 45.5%. Nick Claxton was the second best Brooklyn net in the second half last year. He was number 94 at about 12 points and 10 rebounds, 2.6 defensive stats, a back-breaking free throw percent, and pretty good field goal number. That was the Nick Claxton. Bridges was number 118, but more importantly, Bridges took 15 shots per game over the second half of the season. That's the number that I want everybody focused on, because Bojan Bogdanovic comes in. He's not going to take all 15 of those shots. He's really the only player that arrives in this. So it's Bridges for Bojan. If we think through a little bit, basically what Bojan Bogdanovic did the first half of this past year, so the half of the season that he was with the Pistons, or you could even look at the previous year for Bojan with the Pistons when he was getting pretty significant usage. This, again, we're just sort of looking at it from the lens of what if this is how Brooklyn arrives on opening day? And I don't think it's going to be, but what if it is? Bojan took about 15 shots a game with the Pistons each of the last 2 seasons there. His number dropped to 9 shots per game in New York. So I want to sort of throw that number out. With Detroit, dude averaged 20 points a game. And I know that his peripheral stats are trash. 0.9 defensive stats this last year, 0.7 the previous year. He hits a bunch of 3-pointers. For some reason, he couldn't make his free throws this season, or if he did, he would have been a more valuable fantasy player. But you're looking at a guy who, frankly, was not all that far off the Cam Thomas build. The guy we just talked about is like, oh, this is the guy who's going to take all the shots in the universe. If Bojan Bogdanovic is there, he'll take shots. We saw it in Detroit. Like, marginal player on a really bad team. He won't be afraid to go and chuck a little bit. And right now, they'd almost have no choice but to play him because everybody else is so bad, and the young players are not exciting. Sorry, Brooklyn. Your young players are not exciting. I don't know who you point at and you're like, oh, this is the guy they're going to build around. Is it Cam Thomas? Because if so, we're already accounting for the fact that he's going to take frickin' 18, 19, 20 shots a ball game. Who are the other guys? Noah Clowney? Trendon Watford? Like, these guys are not dudes you're going to build your team around. So what's we're going to go young. You can play your regulars and you're still going to be terrible. If the Nets bring back Nick Claxton, which I saw a tweet late last night or first thing this morning that it sounds like they do want to bring him back, then this is a team that's going to be significantly sub 500, but not horrible enough to be worse than the NBA. So my inclination is to say this team probably unloads anybody else that gives them a reasonable shot to win a basketball game. What are they going to be able to get for a Bojan Bogdanovic? Honest to God, I don't know. So does he get traded before the year or sometime in the middle of the season? Hard to say. What happens to Ben Simmons? Honestly, I don't think he's playing basketball again, but I don't know. What happens to Dennis Schroeder? That's a guy who should get moved. He's a veteran. Lots of teams out there could use a backup point guard. We saw he was very good during his time in Los Angeles in that role. So is he there? Dorian Finney-Smith, we know, is on the block. Cam Johnson is going to be on the block. So it's pretty damn hard to make an accurate assessment. But again, if this is the way they come into opening night, guys like Cam Johnson also get a really big bump. Cam Johnson, Bojan Bogdanovic. I don't know about Dorian Finney-Smith because dude needs a lot of shots to get there, and so you probably need Cam Thomas out. But you're looking at a team where the regulars are going to have to do a lot of stuff, and they've removed a usage guy from the equation. I don't think I'm targeting Cam Johnson on draft night. I don't know that I'm targeting any of these guys. But Cam Thomas, to me, is probably worthwhile. He strikes me as the guy that would be toughest to move, if only because they feel like they could probably milk him as part of a little bit of a rebuild. Like, there's no reason that they have to move on from Cam Thomas. He's not making a ton of money. $2.5 million this year, $4 the following year, $6 the year after that. That's the qualifying offer. So restricted free agency on the table at that point. There's no reason to move Cam Thomas unless they got a ton of stuff back. And now they've got 9 first-round picks sitting in their haul. How much more do you need? 1, 2, 3? I mean, the Thunder got all of them in the universe, and they haven't been able to use them yet. Maybe they do. Maybe then we're like, oh, that's why you get all the first-rounders. But how many do the Nets really want? Is there any advantage to that? Or is the advantage to holding on to a guy like Cam Thomas, seeing what the next season brings, maybe trading him before the following year? Like, they could wait this one out. The rest of the guys they got to get rid of. You got to get rid of Cam Johnson. He's making too much money. You got to get rid of Ben Simmons. He's making too much money. He doesn't play. You got to get rid of Dennis Schroeder because someone's going to want him. You got to get rid of Dorian Finney-Smith. Same story, really. As it stands, if they bring back Nick Claxton, I think you could probably get him in the 60s or 70s, and I think that'd probably be fine. Cam Thomas, you're probably going to have to overspend for with the way things are built right now because everyone's going to be like, oh, this dude's going to take 30 shots a ball game. We're going to completely forget about the field goal percent and bad defensive stats, and people are going to be like, oh, he's a top 40 guy, and it's going to be freaking Jordan Poole all over again. So I wouldn't overpay for Cam Thomas. I have no problem. I'd love to have him on my fantasy team this year because I think he could average 25 points a game, but I'm not going to spend, a top 50 pick on him. The guy that I would look at as sort of like the undervalued possible target on this team is, man, I don't know that there is one. This again is assuming they bring Claxton back. He's probably going to be about, a soft hit on draft night. Thomas, you're going to have to overpay. Cam Johnson, I don't think there's still enough on the table for him to do. Schroeder's fantasy game is not very good. And Dorian Finney-Smith needs, 10, 11 shots to get there. Really? As it stands right now, it's probably a safer bet that you just let it go. We got a live viewer who's talking about how Brooklyn has some quality backup players. Yeah, but none of these guys, like Josh said, none of these guys is a build-around dude. Noah Clowney is fine, but he's not like superstar level. Deron Sharp, he's fine. I think we have a little bit of like a rose-colored lenses thing because sometimes these guys drop in and they have like their 1 28-minute game where they put up some pretty big numbers. But when they've been tasked with doing more, they've struggled. I haven't seen much from these Brooklyn backups to think these are guys that they want to shoehorn into 35 minutes for development. I think these are guys that are going to get shoehorned into 30 minutes because they're going to get rid of the veterans in front of them. And then we can look at it. And at that point, we talked about this last year on the show a little bit. Trendon Watford, his fantasy game didn't really translate all that well. Deron Sharp's translated a little bit better, but even that was questionable. Given enough playing time, he was a successful rebounder. Clowney's the guy where you're like, okay, I could see this panning out. If you gave him full starters minutes, that's probably a fantasy player I would take a shot on. If somehow like Dennis Smith Jr. ends up back there playing 26, 27 minutes, there's so many directions that this can go that we really can't lock it in right now. And so right now, my advice is mostly avoid. Let's see what happens with Nick Claxton. That's going to be one that really shapes what goes down with a guy like a Clowney or a Sharp or something in that front court because both those guys can rebound. Sharp is a really good rebounder, but he didn't really do anything else during his time on the floor. And Clowney, we've seen that there's some upside on defensive stats with him, but in terms of like getting enough data to say this is a direction we got to go, we're not there yet. And the weirdness of, the Nets really do want to bring back Nick Claxton. I think they want to bring him back so that they could potentially trade him, whether it's this year or the following year or something like that. It's always better for teams now to re-sign a guy, even if they don't intend to play him through that contract. Does that make sense? Like, they might be trying to bring back Nick Claxton so they can play him for a year and then trade him next year when it's like full rebuild time. Because right now they have all these clunky veteran contracts that are going to be kind of hard to all move at the same moment. They might not be able to fully clean house. It's easier said than done. Sure, you could take pennies on the dollar for your guys, but oftentimes a GM will be like, yeah, I mean, I guess I could take pennies on the dollar to just be a little bit worse, or I could be bad enough and try to rehabilitate a guy's value. So keep that in mind. Over the next 2.5 months, how many teams have you all seen that successfully unloaded everyone? Usually there's a couple of dudes that just sort of like hang on, stragglers, veteran stragglers. Best recent example I can think of is Orlando. The Magic were just like, yeah, we're going to send everybody. Boom, gone. The whole freaking team. Gordon, Vooch, the lot of them, out of here. They did it all at once. Ripped the Band-Aid off. And to a certain degree, they didn't really care how much they got back in a lot of that stuff because they just wanted to be awful, and it worked out for them. Other teams should probably look at that and say, oh, this is intriguing. But a lot of times GMs get kind of caught up in the like, I can't lose all of my trades mode. So we'll see. Right now, mostly avoid, because I think Cam Thomas is going to be overdrafted. I think they do try to bring back Claxton, even if it doesn't make a ton of rebuild sense. And so then you get a lot of what you had last year where you replace Bridges with Bogdanovich, and that doesn't leave a whole lot for the youth movement, at least not yet. Thank you again to Josh Lloyd for popping on this one. Half of our interview. You'll get the other half of our interview a little bit later on today. We'll put out that second episode. That'll be on the upcoming draft and who to watch for in it, if anyone. He is, of course, at RedRock_B-Ball on the Twitters and the host of LockedOn Fantasy Basketball. Folks, please take a moment, like, rate, subscribe. It is the most important thing you can do for the growth of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter, at Old Man Squad on Twitter. That account is growing very fast these days, which is very cool. And again, I say it one more time on the way out. Like, rate, subscribe. I need you guys. Thanks to Josh. I'm Dan. We'll see you guys later today.